Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete, joined as always by Ricardo Martinez Paz. Week 1, NFL is back. We have Steelers and Eagles regular season football to talk about and break down. We are excited. It's a great time to be a sports fan. It's a great time to just have the NFL back, and if you can't tell, I'm super excited. I know you are as well, Ricardo. So that being said, I welcome you in. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Ready to talk about week 1. I mean, it's not fully over yet, but I mean, both our teams got a win, which, I mean, the Steelers getting a win over the Bengals a bit more surprising, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Definitely more surprising. And I mean, we will get into it in a second, but I mean, just in general, how was your viewing pleasure this weekend of finally having a full slate of NFL Sunday games back? We weren't together watching the games this weekend, but what was your setup like? How'd you have it going?
Yeah, so we had 3 TVs going. One of my friends, Rob, had his laptop watching the Patriots game because he's a Pats fan. So we had 4 screens essentially the whole time. I saw you had quite a few screens as well.
Yeah, we had the 3 TVs set up in my house. Volume on the Steelers game.
Yeah,
I had the Eagles one down below it, and then I had we also had the Patriots. We had the Patriots game on the third monitor.
Mhm.
So yeah, got 3 going there. It was it's the best way to do it, you know. One of my friends was saying like I don't know, some people are red zone fans. I'm not really super crazy about red zone. I'd rather just dive in and focus on a game or two.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you can have red zone going on another TV. That's another way to go about it. But hey, it's back and we got to enjoy it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man.
So, that being said, I think we'll get right into kind of talking about these games. I think the best way to do it is to kind of go and dive into each of our kind of key takeaways from the game, and then any other kind of notes or stuff we want to touch on, or things that we feel could have gone differently, stuff like that. So, should we start with the Steelers, or you want to start with the Eagles here?
Let's do the Eagles since that game was a little less chaotic than the
Steelers. There's a lot of stuff that was going on in that Steelers game.
Exactly.
But, hey, the Eagles game ended up getting pretty close here as well. As you know, I don't know. Did that one have you biting your nails down at the end here?
No, it really didn't. I don't know. It's like the Lions as Jared Goff. I was like, I mean, it was what 38-35. I was like, oh, the Eagles just got to ice the drive. But like overall, I don't know. It's just the Lions are still the Lions. They're not good. Jared Goff isn't anything like special. I mean, he kind of did do fairly well against the Eagles defense, but no, like in the end, like literally at the end of it, I was like, nah, it's fine. Like I was actually more calm than I expected. But it was like the Eagles are going to hold on to this lead somehow. It's just, even though it's kind of like literally a mess defensively, but
yeah. Well, I mean, even when you know I was watching the Steelers game and I was like completely locked in on it, but just like having the Eagles game there, and when the Lions scored that touchdown with like I think still 4.5 minutes left, I kind of turned to my buddy, different Rob, not the Rob that you were referring to that you were watching with, but I was like, this game just got like really randomly close when it felt like the whole time the Eagles were in complete control. But yeah, I don't know if you want to get into what some of your key takeaways are. Why don't you tell us the first one, and we'll kind of break that down a little bit.
Yeah, so my first one, I mean, sort of similar to last year, really, when the Lions and Eagles played in the regular season. The Eagles gashed the rush defense again for the Lions, this time for 216 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. I mean, the offensive line got a lot of push and, I mean, opened up a lot of holes. Miles Sanders looked good. That was encouraging to see, especially coming off his hamstring injury. He led the team in rushing with 96 yards. He scored a touchdown. I was like, wow, the first time in 2 years this man has scored. But that was great to see. All the running backs scored. Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, even Jalen Hurts rushed for one. So it was like, geez, just a rushing, like, just my God, it was a clinic out there running the ball. But
I mean, I'll say just to touch on that too. I actually started Miles Sanders because I kind of figured it was going to be a repeat of last year. I started Miles Sanders in my fantasy league because I was like, they're just going to exploit how bad this Lions rush defense is.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, it was great to see Miles Sanders score a rushing touchdown, but like you said, all three running backs did. But still, at the end of the day, I mean, I think you got to feel that Miles Sanders kind of asserted himself as the lead back in this backfield, and it felt like he was the guy in this game when it came to the running backs. And I mean, he had 13 carries versus Gainwell and Scott, who both had 5 and 4 respectively. But it still felt like it was kind of like Sanders was the lead guy, and the other two were kind of the complementary pieces behind him. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say so. He definitely got the most snaps out of the other two too. So it's definitely his job to lose, I guess, and he certainly helped his case in keeping that starting job, at least for next week against the Vikings, which that's going to be a tougher task. But
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we'll get into the Vikings game in a second, but the running attack certainly looked good. That was one of definitely the best aspects of how this Eagles team performed this week. Now, what about
yeah,
the defense? Because I know there was, clearly giving up 35 points to the Lions isn't something that's ideal, but what walk us through your takeaways a little bit of how you felt about this Eagles defense.
yeah. So sort of how we've been touching on it, like how the Eagles didn't really play their starters during preseason and didn't tackle to the ground during practices. It definitely showed up against the Lions. There's quite a few whiff tackles. I don't have the exact number on how many missed tackles, but I counted at least 5 or 6, which doesn't seem like that many, but they were very noticeable, especially when the Lions players gained a lot more yardage after the fact. And then just, I don't know, something about the zone coverage that the Eagles are running, it just wasn't like there were just too many holes. It just like was very easy for Jared Goff to pick out his receivers. And like pressure, we only got 1 sack on him. So that wasn't, it was again sort of reminiscent of last season, really, just similar kind of situation. It seemed like Hassan Reddick didn't really do much other than like 2 tackles, I believe, something like that. And Jordan Davis was underutilized. I mean, he only played, I think it was 22 snaps. And when he was in the game, he was impactful. He actually stopped the run quite like he just was just a huge presence on that front four. So it's really again the pressure just keeps mounting onto Jonathan Gannon. It's really we've been saying, sort of how he has all this pressure to get the best out of his players, and I'm not sure he did that. Actually, no, he didn't at all, for that matter. Um, it wasn't all bad necessarily.
Well,
Kept
I've got a question for you because it's an interesting. I have a couple questions here. We're gonna have to spend a little bit of time here for a second on this
yeah
Eagles defense and how it was utilized. And I have a couple questions written down, but one that just came to mind, and I think we may have briefly touched on this when we did our cornerback preview, was how like the Eagles have a lot of guys, Darius Slay, James Bradbury specifically, who thrive in man coverage, and the
yeah
fact that Jonathan Gannon likes to do, he's a zone coverage kind of guy first and foremost, and I think you saw that. You touched on it. I think that's a very good point. So, how concerned are you that that could be something that becomes more of an issue as you start to face teams with more talented wide receiver cores? And you're going to see that as soon as this week against the Vikings when they go up against Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen.
right. I mean, it's especially going up against better quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is going to be better than Jared Goff. He's obviously better. So it's going to be, I don't know, especially if the front four isn't getting pressure and you're running zone coverages. That's just, I don't know. The quarterback can just pick and choose where they want to put the ball, especially if the zones are that open like they were yesterday against the Lions. That would be very much concerning. Like, yeah, they didn't allow like huge plays necessarily, but it's still like you're allowing easy completions, and it's really something that has been an issue for the Eagles defense since last year, since Gannon took over as defensive coordinator. So he's got to like just disguise coverages. Like he's got to run more man coverage. James Bradbury is really good at it. Darius Slay is pretty good at it. So I don't know what the risk, why he's like hesitant on running more man. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's something that maybe we haven't touched on enough. I know we've talked a lot about obviously how he's going to utilize all these pass rushers and specifically how he's going to deploy Hassan Reddick, but I think the fact that he's running so much zone, I don't have the numbers on it, and this is just something that I hadn't even really thought of until you brought it up again. But that's something that we're going to have to keep our eye on going forward, especially as they play some of these better teams. But briefly talking about Hassan Reddick, I mean, what else do you think that Gannon has to do differently next week to kind of, try and limit things? Maybe like what do you think overall of his usage of the pass rushers in this week one? I guess is the best way to kind of go at this question first.
I mean, there was a lot of rotation, which okay, that's fine, but I don't know. Like he ran a lot of front three, front five. I mean, he switched up the front quite a bit, which I don't know if that's the best thing, especially when I mean you only get one sack on the quarterback and only a few pressures. Like you have so many good pass rushers, and yet he's still. I mean, yeah, it's still early, so maybe he's trying to figure out how to best use the players, what formations, what fronts to use. Um, but obviously for Hassan Reddick, he's a lot better as a pass rusher. He dropped back in coverage a few times, and I just was scratching my head after. I was like, what is this? Like why? Like I know you said that during the
Well,
press conference, but like no,
I,
that's not
I
his
actually
strong
I
suit.
actually have the numbers here that of the 26 quarterback dropbacks that Hassan Reddick was on the field for, he was rushing the passer 21 of those 26 times. So I mean, that's 5 additional times where you have Reddick on the field and you're misutilizing him, It's like
Yeah,
if that number if like I get it if it's once or twice just to kind of throw the defense off a little bit, but I mean, it's been well established throughout his entire career and the numbers back it up that this guy is most effective when you're letting him rush the quarterback every single time he's on the field for a drop back. And,
yeah,
5 times it may not seem like a lot, but it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, that's the way that you have to utilize him. And you know, you don't want to see this kind of become a trend where you're seeing 5, 6, 7, upwards of 10 snaps a game. He's on the field. The quarterback is dropping back to pass, and he's not getting after rushing the quarterback.
yeah. I mean, I also sort of just overall, I would think it was just an overall concern from the front four that they didn't get more pressure because the Lions were down a few players. I mean, Vaitai being the former Eagle offensive lineman, offensive tackle, guard, Vaitai. I can't pronounce his first name for the
Yeah.
hell of it, but yeah, he wasn't playing. I can't remember the other player that wasn't, but like this is a game that the Eagles should have dominated in the trenches essentially. But for some reason the front four didn't do that. Maybe it was too much rotation, or maybe it was the fronts that Gannon was running. I really like. I don't know. It's all still. I mean, it's very early, so
Well,
he's still got to figure stuff out.
I'm
But
sure part of it is kind of what you touched on too, is the lack of utilization for Jordan Davis. And
yeah,
I don't know, do you see them, potentially getting him more involved? I don't know if it's something that they want to bring the rookie along slowly or whatnot, or maybe it's just out of respect to Fletcher Cox that they don't want to have him in there for more snaps. But do you see him becoming a bigger part of this defense sooner rather than later? Because it's shown that when he was on the field, he was effective.
yeah. I think yeah, he'll be used more. I mean, hopefully sooner. I don't know yet. I thought what was interesting was that Milton Williams got more snaps than Jordan Davis. He's like no discredit to him at all. It's just when you're drafted in the first round and Jordan Davis is playing like exclusively as like a nose tackle, even though he can play as sort of like D tackle, not necessarily in the front of that three. It's a little concerning, but I think if like he'll get more snaps as the season progresses. So I'm not worried about it right now.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really have to be a big concern. And at the end of the day, they did still get the win. How much so and this is something that we've talked about a ton, but it's the rust aspect of whether there was going to be that rust, whether there was going to be a lack of form because the Eagles weren't tackling to the ground during training camp.
Yeah.
They rested their starters for weeks 2 and 3 of the preseason. Only really played 1 or 2 series in the first preseason game. And I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you see that? Did you see that rust factor? I mean, Marcus Epps was one guy. He looked fantastic. I
Yep.
thought he was flying around the field. I'm sure you're going to want to touch on him, but I mean, outside of that, did you see a lot of guys who are maybe struggling with their form a little bit, struggling to make those tackles? And I mean, hopefully, it's not going to be something that carries over into these weeks 2 and 3 here.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a factor. I mean, yeah, Marcus Epps was arguably the player of the game for the defense. I don't care that James Bradbury got a pick six, but I think it was Kaiser White also who deflected that pass into James Bradbury's hand. He actually did fairly well too in his debut with the Eagles. So those two were the best players. They didn't show any rust. The others, yeah, the rust was clearly there. So but I don't think it's going to carry over too much longer. It's just, I don't know. Overall, they were flat as a unit, but there was definitely some positives to take away from it. It's not the I'm not going to, panic. Not just yet, but
Okay, fair enough. And again, they got the win and they came out relatively healthy and they came into the game
yeah.
relatively healthy. So, last question, just because I'm curious, it was his debut. 3 words or less. How'd you feel about CJ Gardner-Johnson's debut?
It was up and down. I give him
Up and
credit
down.
because he
That's a
played a
good way to
lot
put
of.
up and down. Up and down. I
Yeah,
mean,
like I give him credit because he only came in like last week or so, or like a week and a half ago, and he
yeah.
played a majority of the snaps on defense as a safety, like opposite Marcus Epps. So I give him credit for that. There were a few tackles he whiffed, but overall, I mean, he was pretty. I don't know, like he did make some plays. He did. He made some good tackles. Did whiff some, but yeah, I mean, yeah. Overall, it was a up and down. I expect him to get better as he learns Jonathan Gann's system a bit more, but and also he's transitioning from like corner to more of like dime corner to a safety. So that's I give him credit for that too. So it's not easy.
Definitely. So you want to walk us through your last takeaway, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. And anything else you want to
Yeah,
touch on?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So the last one I think, which is something that's been hyped about. I mean, it's been raved about the entire like leading up to this season. It's AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts connection. That connection was very much on display, and
It
I
was
was,
dynamic.
oh my goodness, yeah, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I mean, yeah, he had what 10 receptions, 155 yards, um, and including 154-yard rainbow pass from Jalen Hurts to Brown. That was a great catch, great throw altogether. I mean, that just shows you how good of a player he is. Um, and I'm surprised the Lions didn't like double him more, especially when, I mean, even the first half he had like over 100 yards. So that, I mean, yeah, he's just a beast, and Jalen Hurts clearly loves him. He's clearly his favorite target. Although it did sort of come at the expense of Devontae Smith because he only had 4 targets, and he didn't actually catch a ball, which is I'm a little like I'm not worried about it. It's just um, I was a bit discouraged by that. We'll say.
I've been, I said this, I think, when we were kind of breaking down the game, but I think that AJ Brown is an absolutely dynamic wide receiver. And I think that he fits Philadelphia like an absolute glove. I think that the way that he's kind of embraced the city, the fans are embracing him. I remember when they had that preseason game or the practice or whatever, when he was saying like, "Oh yeah, I don't dive for balls in practice," but he was like, it felt like a practice playing here in Lincoln Financial Field, so he dove for one anyway. I think that
Mhm.
this is a guy that's going to absolutely thrive in Philadelphia. And I think you're just seeing the beginning of what's going to be. Honestly, I'd be surprised if it wasn't a top 10 wide receiver, if he didn't perform like a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL this season. I think that
Yeah.
I think that the connection that he already has established with Jalen Hurts, um, I'm buying into it. I'm all in on it. And I mean, I guess that kind of begs the question that I got to ask you is kind of where's your confidence level when it comes to Jalen Hurts after just one game? When it comes to just his pure stats on paper and everything, 243 yards in the air, no passing touchdowns, no interceptions. But then again, he did have the big day on the ground, also, scrambling for 90 yards and a touchdown. So
Yeah.
when it comes to, obviously, we know what he is as a runner. We know
Yeah.
that this connection between A.J. Brown is very distinct already. So where's your confidence level after one game? Obviously not the greatest defense, but what did you think of how Hurts performed specifically?
Much like CJ Gardner Johnson, up and down. I mean, Jalen Hurts started off the game 0 for what, 5, 0 for 6. So, I mean, off the start, the offensive line also didn't help with that. They looked like very, very shaky to begin the game. But eventually in the second drive, he got into a lot better rhythm, completed easy passes and stuff like that. So, it, yeah, so he had his bad moments, Jalen Hurts, and he had his good ones for sure. I mean that 54-yard throw to AJ Brown is just one example of it. But I, man, it's so tough for me right now. Like if I had to do a stock up, stock even, stock down kind of thing, I'd say his stock's even because he showed, yeah, like some signs of progression, but then some of the tendencies of last season where he would break the pocket a little too soon, and like as soon as pressure is in his face, sometimes you roll to his right and so. But like it's good that he's like it really helps that he's able to run. He's mobile.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
bailed
mean, that
it
is
bailed
such
him
a
out
key
a lot.
part of his game. It's such a
Yeah,
key part of his game. Yeah.
it bailed him out a lot yesterday, and extended drives for the Eagles, which was good. But I don't know. As a passer, he's again still sort of stuck even for me. It's a bit more like he needs to show a bit more poise, and I'll sort of cut him some slack because the offensive line, like I said, started off a little erratic, a little poor. But um, I I don't know. Like I feel like he could have distributed the ball a bit better too. Because I mean, Devontae Smith, like I said, didn't have a single catch. Dallas Goedert, it took him a while to get a few catches in there. I think he ended up with like 3 or
Well,
4.
what is your concern level with Devontae Smith not having a single catch yesterday? Is that something that you're at all concerned about, or it's just like, hey, they were feeding AJ Brown and obviously just feeding the running game as well?
Yeah, it's more of that. Those two, the feeding AJ Brown and the run game. So the other thing is teams are going to focus more on AJ Brown as the season goes on. So Devontae Smith's definitely going to get those opportunities to at least have pretty like a lot better games than he did yesterday. And I mean, he would have had one catch, but it was taken off by flag. But it's I'm not gonna panic at all yet. Like he's like it's still very early on for like all of this. So I'm not gonna overreact to any of it. It's just sort of keeping some realistic expectations, but also like having some positive outlook on this team for hopefully. I mean, getting a boost from Dak Prescott getting injured, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that we would save that for when we kind of preview the Eagles' next game. You know,
Yeah,
because when we a little later in the episode we'll preview their matchup against the Vikings. I
yeah,
think we can touch on Dak Prescott getting
yeah,
hurt there.
yeah,
But is there
definitely.
anything else from this game specifically that you wanna mention?
AJ Brown, player of the game. That's not even a question. That's
No,
all
it
I'll
definitely was
say.
not a player of a question. I mean, honestly, Ricardo, honestly, like, are your excitement levels like through the roof with like how well this already looks like it may be panning out? I mean, the fact that you guys have passed on wide receivers in Justin Jefferson in the
Yeah,
in the one draft, the fact that you've passed you drafted JJ Arthega-Whiteside a couple years ago, like to
right.
have a guy like AJ Brown perform so well in week 1, how excited does that get you?
I know I'm not really showing it, but like it, it it does make me feel somewhat more confident. Yeah, definitely makes me feel more confident about this team overall and how it can be like aerially, like how Jalen Hurts can improve and how much better AJ Brown makes him. So the expectations for me are like getting higher now after watching last or yesterday's game. I mean, that was AJ Brown. I mean, AJ Brown specifically, I'm really excited for. I was
Yeah.
already to begin with, but yesterday just put it up that much more.
Yeah, and I mean with the fact that Miles Sanders looked so well and AJ Brown to perform well, and you
Yeah,
kind of still have that confidence in Devontae Smith, and obviously you know what you're getting in Dallas Goedert week in and week out.
yeah.
It's a pretty good showing, not gonna lie, not gonna lie. All right, so that
Offensively,
being said, I think we can transition to the Steelers a little bit,
yes.
and you know we'll get into my takeaways first and foremost here. You know, it was one of those questions for me where it was like, you know, what's the biggest takeaway? And I'm going to get into TJ Watt in a second, but I have to start off first and foremost with how well this defense played and with how much that they struggled at times last year to come out and have such a great showing against a team in the Bengals, which obviously is such a prolific offense, but
Hmm.
to really hold them in check the whole game. And, you know, this was the terminology I used. They weren't just forcing turnovers, they were manufacturing turnovers. There's a difference between being able to get stops and having the occasional turnover. They were literally going out on the field trying to disrupt the Bengals to the point where they were forcing the turnovers, manufacturing turnovers, and really, you know, at times creating points, but also just getting the ball back to their offense. So that
Yeah.
was incredible. They had 5 total. Minka Fitzpatrick really set the tone of the game
Yeah.
with that pick six. First pick six, you know, the first 6 points of the game came on the pick six. And,
Yep.
you know, that it was weird that there was a stat that was actually the first time I think since 1960 that the Steelers' first points of the season had come on a pick six, which I don't even know how like you would have known that the Steelers had ever scored on a pick six to start a season before. But
Yeah,
so be it. I would have guessed that was the first time it's ever happened. But
yeah,
that was the one of the highlights from just a great game from Minka Fitzpatrick. He had obviously the pick six. He blocked the extra point that would have
hmm
won the game for the Bengals at the end of regulation. He also
yeah,
led the team in tackles with 14, which kind of a sneaky 14. It didn't even feel like he was necessarily racking up that many tackles as it was all happening, but he had an incredible game and really was the leader of this defense and was kind of the catalyst for a lot of their success that was happening on that side of the ball.
yeah. So
To talk about a couple other performances that were also well, I mean, TJ Watt played well. We'll get into him in a second. Akella Witherspoon also had an interception. Cam Sutton had an interception. Alex Highsmith very quietly had a great game. He had a forced fumble that was recovered by Cameron Hayward, 3 sacks total. And, we've constantly been talking about him kind of stepping up and being that other cog on the Steelers pass rush. And, he was able to do that with the 3 sacks. And, again, I want to kind of just touch on the turnovers and everything first and foremost before we get into TJ Watt. But to see him perform well is definitely an encouraging sign, too.
yeah, definitely. I was like, dude, like what is going on? I have Joe Burrow on my fantasy team. I was like, oh my lord, this dude let up. Well, he turned the ball over 5 times. I mean, that's just how much credit do you give to why am I blanking on his name right now? Former Dolphins dude. Oh my god, what's his name?
Or
Brian
who?
Flores. No,
Oh,
Brian
Brian
Flores.
Flores.
Yeah,
Um,
like how big of
I don't think a lot of the credit necessarily goes to Brian Flores for the turnovers themselves, but
right, right.
I think that a lot of credit has to go to Brian Flores. I mean, very quietly, I think that Miles Jack and Devin Bush both played extremely well. Neither of them really showed up crazy high on the stat sheet, but it felt like, well, I guess Miles Jack did to a certain extent. He had 10 tackles, which was second on the team. But
Yeah.
even Devin Bush, 5 tackles, 2 of them solo. I thought both guys played very steadily, did a good job, and that's something I'm going to be excited to see is how can they consistently play well at the middle line, inside linebacker position week in and week out. So that's more or less where I'd give the credit to
Mhm.
Brian Flores more than necessarily the turnovers and the interceptions. I think the turnovers and interceptions just comes from the fact that this defense, a lot of these guys have been playing together for a long time, and the areas of weakness that they had last year, they went out and addressed, and it's just one of those really well-balanced defensive units overall where there's not a lot of weaknesses.
Mhm. So,
Uh,
let me ask you this then. Um, do you think that this kind of production is sustainable?
I think that they can certainly be one of the teams in the NFL that leads the league in turnovers. I think that they are a turnover-oriented defense. That's first and
Yeah.
foremost. But I think a big issue now that I think we can kind of get into is the fact that there's this TJ Watt injury. And,
Yes.
obviously all it takes is kind of one injury or two, and you can kind of see the holes on your defense kind of appear. I think you can go back to not last season, but the season prior. So that would have been 2020 when I thought that the Steelers defense was had the capabilities to be one of the best in the NFL. And then Devin Bush goes down week 4, and Robert Spillane stepped up and kind of filled the hole. But then you saw
Mhm.
Bud Dupree go down, and then that other pass rusher opposite TJ Watt wasn't there, and they weren't really the same defense the rest of the season.
Right.
So if you lose a guy in TJ Watt, who's arguably, arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, obviously, Aaron Donald's going to have a case against that. But
Yeah.
TJ Watt is right up there with the best of them. I guess I'll say first and foremost, the latest on him is that it could be a torn pec, but they're going to wait and get a second opinion tomorrow on what the actual case is. So it sounds like tomorrow we'll get the diagnosis on how long it's going to be.
Yeah.
Reportedly, he wasn't in major pain post game, which could be a good sign. Obviously, reading up on just some medical analysis of it, that's certainly a good sign. Usually, when it's a clear cut torn pec, you will have that major pain.
Yeah.
And the other report was, I think it was Ian Rappaport that phrased it as they're weighing rehab versus surgery. So I think either way, he's certainly going to miss a pretty significant chunk of games. But if
Yeah.
there's a way that he's not out for the whole season, that's going to be a major win. And Mark Cabali, one of my favorite beat writers for the Steelers, also said, take it for what you will. But he was going through all the team meetings today at the facility. So clearly very involved still with the team. And the fact that it's not worst case scenario, clear cut, torn pec, and major pain, he's done for the year, going to need surgery. I mean, it's good signs right now, but I will say for as long as he's out, this Steelers defense is not going to be the same. I don't think anybody would question that.
Right. So then my question to you would be, who steps up, and do the Steelers consider bringing someone else in to even just for depth
You
purposes?
look first and foremost at stepping up. I think it's the guy I mentioned before. It's got to be Alex Highsmith. He's got to
Mhm.
kind of come into his own now, year 3. Already 3 sacks yesterday, which is a great sign. I set the goal of him get into a double-digit sack category, break 10 sacks. I think without a doubt, if TJ Watt's out for the majority of the season, if not the whole season, you're going to need Alex Highsmith without a doubt to be a double-digit sack guy. And then
Mhm.
I don't think you necessarily look at bringing someone in. I think you brought in Malik Reed to be that rotational piece. I think you could potentially look at someone to then step into the rotational piece, but I would have confidence in Malik Reed to kind of step in and be that number 2 outside linebacker fill in where the void of TJ Watt would be. Obviously, he isn't going to be TJ Watt, but he's got
Right.
the experience of filling in for Bradley Chubb and Von Miller in Denver when they both missed time for injury. So,
Yeah.
that would kind of be how I'd assess them going about it. But bringing in a different guy to start where TJ Watt would be, I don't think would be the case. I think that it would be kind of rolling with Malik Reed would be kind of the way to do it. And maybe you run out there more of sets with Tyson Alualu on the field, and you have Ogunjobi kind of line up more in a pass rushing scenario where he's been better throughout his career, and you let him kind of try to get to the quarterback. Get to the quarterback more often and have him rushing the passer more often. I think that would kind of be the way that they'd go about, filling the void that would be left by TJ Watt. I will also say one other thing on TJ Watt. Cameron Hayward and Stephon Tuitt both suffered a torn pectoral muscle
Yeah.
at different points in their career, and both have come back. Stephon Tuitt came back and had the best season of his career in 2019 after the injury. I mean, we've seen how Cameron Hayward has played the last couple of years, playing
Yeah.
at an all-pro level, arguably the best season of his career last year after that injury. So even if, trying to stay optimistic with TJ Watt, you hope that he can come back at some point this season. But even if he can't, I would have confidence that he could come back and be the same player that he has been. Even last year being defensive player of the year, I think I'd be confident he could get back to that after the surgery.
Yeah, I mean, one thing's for sure though. I mean, TJ Watt's irreplaceable. There's no one
He's
else like.
irreplaceable. Yeah, I look, I'm talking about all the ways you could possibly try to rework the defense
Yeah.
to make it fit. But I mean, you're losing a top 3 defensive player in the NFL. I mean, that's a major hole that this defense isn't going to be the same without him. I mean, you felt it yesterday on some of those major plays in overtime.
Yeah.
Man, it would be nice to have TJ Watt in here rushing the quarterback and getting a big time sack. I mean, that would have been really nice. And unfortunately, we weren't really able to do that.
Yeah. No, I just injuries are like obviously part of the game, but when you see these kinds of like really like good players in the NFL, it's just you really hate to see it. It's just like you always want to see the best players out there on the field produce, even if it's against your own team, even if it's a pain in the ass to defend against them. Just like seeing that player out there that's just so special, just and then not for him not to be there, like perhaps for the whole season is just. I mean, just from like a general fan standpoint, it just like that just sucks. That just you hate to see.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where the product is just going to be better in the NFL anytime you have all the stars out there. I mean, injuries are inevitable, but when the best player on your team in week 1 goes down with potentially a season-ending injury, it's just absolutely brutal coming off a defensive player of the year season as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't want to spend too much more time on the defense, but I will say one other thing I took away. I thought that the run defense looked much better this week than it did, the whole back half of last season. I
Yeah.
thought Larry Ogunjobi played really well. Miles Jack, like I said, Miles Jack, 10 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Ogunjobi, 4 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. I think both those guys, definitely had a clear presence. Tyson Alulu didn't do too much on the stat sheet, but, having him there is also, it's a big boost to this run defense. And I got to say, this was their first test. I said that this was their first test. A guy in Joe Mixon, an improved Bengals offensive line. How well would Joe Mixon do? And outside of that one rush at the end of the first half where he ran for 31 yards, outside of that one rush, he only had 26 carries for 51 yards. So I thought that they passed this test pretty well. And, now we'll get into the Patriots in a little bit here, but I think that the Patriots are going to be, they have a good, solid running attack, but it doesn't scare me as much as, necessarily Joe Mixon would, especially when the Bengals are a more balanced offensive attack than what you're going to get in the Patriots. But we'll get into that in a little bit. But I just wanted to touch on that briefly as well.
Yeah, no, definitely a huge improvement from last year, at least from one game. I mean, one of the worst rush defenses last year. Definitely encouraging to see that they limited Joe Mixon, and it's really interesting too because you would think with the new offensive line, new pieces that Joe Burrow has up front, that they would be a lot better than they were last year. It looked just like last year, though. The Steelers front seven made life hell for Joe Burrow
Yeah,
the
they
whole
really
game. I mean,
seven sacks, which I believe there was some crazy stat about how many seasons in a row the Steelers have had at least one game where they've had 7 plus sacks, and to get it in week 1 against a improved Bengals O line everyone was talking about was pretty impressive.
yeah, I mean that O line just has. I mean, obviously, it's not come together yet, but I mean, the Steelers capitalized. I mean, they did their job, made life hell, wreaked havoc for Joe Burrow, and they won the game at the end of the day. So
Yeah, and I will say too is Alex Kozora of Steeler Depot, I believe, made a really good point where he was like, "Watch out for Cam Hayward to have a big day going up against the rookie Volson, I believe, is their rookie left guard." And
yeah,
I would say he won that matchup pretty easily on the
oh
interior
yeah,
of the line
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So I want to switch gears to the offense a little bit. The biggest thing that I took issue with the offense, you know, they didn't turn the ball over, which I was very happy about. But my biggest issue was the time of possession disparity and the fact
Mhm.
that really in the second half, they weren't able to pick up very many first downs. Just 13 first downs in the entire game. In the entire game, 4 for 15 on thirds down, which just isn't good enough. And in the second half, 4 of their 5 second half drives all resulted in punts. And all 5 of
Mhm.
those drives were 7 plays or left. That's just, you're not on the field long enough. Okay. I don't care that you're not turning the ball over. Yes, obviously, I would rather a drive end in a punt than a turnover. But
Mhm.
when the Steelers defense plays that well and manufactures that many turnovers, that's not a game that should be going to overtime and coming down to the wire. That's a game that you need to win if you have any hopes of making the playoffs this year. So in week 2 and going forward, that's what I'm really looking for. That's what I'm looking to of this offense to take the next step is just maintain drives longer and keep your defense off the field longer. The time of possession, like I just alluded to, 26 minutes and 17 seconds of game time possession for the Steelers compared to 43 minutes and 43 seconds time of possession for the Bengals, which is absurd. It's the most that I think a team has ever possessed against the Steelers in a regular season game in the history of their franchise, and breaks the previous record, which also happened to be against the Bengals back in the day. But that's just not good enough. They need to stay on the field longer. I mean, that's what it ultimately comes down to. They have to possess the ball longer and keep the defense off the field, keep the defense fresh. And I mean, to have it even come down to that final drive where the Bengals were able to get that touchdown to Jamar Chase, I mean, you shouldn't be putting in your defense in that situation. You got to be able to pick up at least one first down when you have the ball with under 2 minutes to go in the game.
Yeah, no, I do absolutely agree with you. I mean, at least one silver lining is that Trubisky didn't turn the ball over.
100%.
And yeah, that's definitely. I mean, sort of how you put it, he managed the game well enough to win the game. But yeah, like you said, it's a matter of really extending drives and giving your defense a break. I mean, the defense can't do. I mean, even though the Steelers defense did just about everything right yesterday, that's unsustainable. You can't expect to win games like that with your defense out there for 40 plus minutes. I mean, that's just. I
One
actually didn't
hundred
realize that.
percent.
That's
And
absurd.
to kind of go back on your point of like, okay, well, are the turnovers sustainable? Well, I'll tell you what, I think the Steelers regularly getting turnovers week in and week out is more sustainable than the Steelers winning games when their defense is on the field this much. So I mean,
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. Where like, yes, we could still say Mitch Trubisky managed the game well enough that they could win, but it was a very fine line of it. It was almost to the point where they were too cautious that they couldn't manage the game. And I don't want to put it all on Trubisky because I think part of it too was the fact that Matt Canada didn't trust the offensive line in the run game enough to really kind of hammer home the runs. And there were times where I almost would have rather them try and run the ball a little bit more. And I get that they were kind of easing Najee Harris back into it because he didn't play a lot in the preseason and training camp with the injury.
yeah,
But I mean, they got to be willing to run the ball more. We've said it. That's how their offense is built. And
yeah.
total on the day, I had it written down here. Total on the day, they only had 13 running attempts total from their 2 running backs. So, that's just not enough for a team that's built through the run and is built through, maintaining possession and managing the game. It's just it's got to be more than that. And I get the offensive line has struggled throughout preseason, but if you're going to be built through your running backs, you have to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, there was only what 75 yards, which is not going to do it against arguably. I mean, teams like of that caliber, the Bengals caliber, they were just having it over.
75 yards rushing, but only 30 of those came from their running backs. Chase Claypool led the team in rushing yards, and that was on jet sweeps and what's the terminology I'm looking for?
End
Jet sweeps
arounds.
and end arounds, exactly. And I mean, that's fine if you're going to be able to manufacture some offense from that. That's great, and I
Yeah,
totally expect it to be a featured part of the Steelers' running attack. But Chase Claypool can't lead the team in rushing yards every game, and you expect to win week in and week out. So
yeah,
that's got to change, and they've got to get. It's tough because I'm going to get into the injury situation with kind of some of these other guys because the Steelers did sustain a lot of injuries in this game.
yeah,
But
yeah.
not Najee Harris getting hurt. If he's healthy, he's going to have to be featured more often, and they're going to have to really ramp him up to where he. I know that they don't want him on the field that much, but he's going to have to at least get 20 carries a game here. I think that's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean,
And
he's
even if it's not Najee
yeah,
Harris, a culmination of Benny Snell, Najee Harris, and Jalen Warren are going to have 20 to 25 carries a game.
yeah, definitely. Also, I just saw this that Eagles defensive end Derek Barnett tore his ACL, so he's done for the season.
Oh no.
That's
That's brutal. It sounded like it wasn't going to be that serious yesterday from everything they were talking about after the game.
yeah, that's what I thought too. But I guess he's done for the year. Yeah,
Oh
but
man. That's
I
tough.
mean
That is
that just means Taron Jackson, who's been showing a lot of promise in preseason, is gonna have to step up and take his
it's
spot.
like you never want to see a player go down and be out for the whole season, but there are more important guys on the Eagles defense that they couldn't afford to lose.
Yeah,
Because that's a spot that they have depth.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe this allows Jonathan Gannon to be like, all right, I'm just going to send Hassan Reddick more to the quarterback now that this is one last pass rusher I have to mix in here. And I don't think it's ever going to be a bad thing to have Josh Sweat on the field more often. And I
yeah,
guess you're
yeah.
really going to have to kind of rely on Brandon Graham at this point to kind of be Brandon Graham at old and hope that he can hold up over the whole course of the season. I mean, would you agree with that assessment that that's kind of how you fill in for what you're going to lack in? I mean, I know you also mentioned Jackson here is going to have to step up as well, but what do you think of how they're going to fill in there?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with what you just said there. I mean, Brandon Graham is working his way back from an injury, Achilles injury. So, but he says he feels he's like in the best form of his career. So, I mean, we'll see how that works out. The rotation is affected by losing Derek Barnett, but definitely not. I mean, like I said, injuries happen. It's just this was one that I hate to say that I'm okay with, but it's like I don't know.
You
It's
can
just
the
rotational
Eagles
piece.
defense can survive it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that you're okay with it, but it's like there are more important pieces that you couldn't afford to lose. Like the Steelers
Yes,
losing
yes.
TJ Watt it's like the Steelers losing TJ Watt versus losing, Robert Spillane for the season. Like, yeah, it hurts,
Yeah,
but it's a rotational piece versus, a cornerstone of your defense.
yeah,
And Derek
exactly.
Barnett was a rotational piece
Yeah,
it hurts to lose him, but you can survive it.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, that's well put.
So I don't really have much more to add. There is one other thing. I'm not going to harp on the offensive line this week because they actually looked decent, especially in pass protection. I was surprised against a formidable defensive front for the Bengals.
Hmm.
They only allowed one sack. Dan Moore allowing a penalty. I was the only one that I distinctly remember them giving up as far as penalties went. And
Yeah,
overall in the pass protection, they did pretty well. I will say they didn't do well when it came to creating spaces in the running game.
yeah, yeah,
Struggled there, and obviously that shows. And I just harped on the running game a lot, so I don't want to get into a lot about that. But they're going to have to create some more push going forward because you'd almost rather them be better in the running game than pass protection because the Steelers finally have mobile quarterbacks to a certain extent, and the Steelers are going to have to be built around their running game. So that's one place they're going to have to be better. George Pickens, real quick, little disappointing. He was held in check, just one catch for 3 yards. Not a big deal, but obviously you're going to hope to see more from him going forward.
yeah,
And then really the last thing that I have to comment on was the injuries mounted up. We talked about TJ Watt a lot. Najee Harris, it sounds like this injury is kind of a re-injury related to that Linz Frank fracture suffered during training camp. So
yeah,
hopefully he'll be all right. and he doesn't miss any, significant amounts of times. If he is to miss a game, it is what it is, but you just don't want him to be out for, a significant chunk of a couple weeks. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Outside of that, Mason Cole and Alex Highsmith both suffered injuries but came back. Levi Wallace, Cam Hayward, Robert Spillane, and DeMarvin Leal all suffered injuries. None of them seem like they're going to be super significant, but again, this was attributable to the defense being on the field for almost 44 minutes of game time. Like, they're going to get run down when you're playing an overtime game that goes literally down to a game-winning field goal where you're playing that whole overtime period. Like,
yeah.
guys are going to get run down and injuries are going to pop up. So it's one of those things where it doesn't sound like any of them were that serious outside of, TJ Watt and hopefully Najee Harris is. But, that's what's going to happen when the defense is on the field for that extent of time and you're playing, that long of a game. Outside of that, when it comes to the game itself, the Steelers won a game I didn't expect them to win. I didn't expect them to beat the Bengals this week. When we did our season, game by game kind of breakdown predictions, I thought that this was going to be a loss. But, hey, the Steelers came in ready to play. The defense played out of their mind and won the day for them. And, luckily they got some breaks. The long snapper for the Bengals getting hurt really benefited the Steelers, and that kind of was the reason that the Bengals missed those couple of field goals in overtime that allowed Chris Boswell to kick the game winner at the end of the game. And the Steelers kind of lucked out there, but you win games any way you can in the NFL, and the Steelers are 1-0, the Bengals are 0-1 in a division game, a division rivalry. So, hey, I'm not going to complain. I'm going to take that victory every single day of the week.
I feel like this is a good transition into week 2, into what we
Absolutely.
have before.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Eagles against the Vikings a little bit. What are you kind of looking for in this game here?
So the two players the Eagles should absolutely keep their eye on, Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, obviously being the biggest threat. I mean, he looks like an absolute maniac. He's just so good. And again, seeing him go against the Eagles, just like, man, what we could have had. But anyway, so the Eagles are Jonathan Gannon are going to have to hone in a lot more on those two. Not that any Lions receiver really was all that spectacular yesterday, but I mean, Justin Jefferson's just a different breed. That dude is he's up there. I mean, he's top 5 right now in the NFL.
In my opinion, him and Jamar Chase by the end of the year, I think, could be the number 1 and number 2 wide receivers in the NFL.
They absolutely could. As I can't
I think guys like Cooper Kupp will certainly have something to say against that. A couple other guys that are maybe slipping my mind a little bit, but those two guys with their production and they're just dynamic in their route running, their speed, their run after the catch ability, contested catches even. There's just not a lot that those guys can't do. But anyway, continue on.
Yeah, so I'm hoping maybe this time around we get more. I don't know. I want to say more man coverage from Darius Slay and James Bradbury. One of them is going to be lined up, and if it's Avonte Maddox who's lined up against him in the slot, I think I would feel okay running man against him. But I would say he's obviously the biggest threat. Adam Thielen's still a pretty good, solid number 2 receiver. But obviously Jefferson is the biggest threat that the Eagles have to focus on. And Dalvin Cook, he ran for 90 yards. I mean, it was against the Packers, whose defense really should have played better overall. But the Eagles defense cannot allow the same amount of rushing yards. I mean, it was like 144 to DeAndre Swift. I mean, that's not going to cut it against the Vikings. Again, they got to cut drives short. They allowed, I believe, 4 9+ play drives. I mean, they've got to change their approach a little bit or do something. That Jonathan Gannon's got to figure something out to stop those two players, at least.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. And I mean, you look at how much rushing, like DeAndre Swift went off last week, or I guess yesterday, against this Eagles front, and now you're going up against just as talented a running back and an offensive line that's obviously much better than what the Lions have at their disposal right now. So I mean, I think that's definitely something you have to keep an eye on. And as you talked at the beginning of the episode, the fact that the Jonathan Gannon wants to play zone so much, how they keep Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson in check, and that I think those are absolutely the two main keys to the game for this Eagles defense. And I think they'll be able to stay. I think they'll be able to stay with it and put up points on the offensive side of the ball. But you could very easily see this turning into a track meet again, where both of these offenses are just kind of running up the scoreboard.
Yeah, and it could happen, but the one thing I guess that benefits the Eagles is that they'll have the home crowd with them. I mean, the fans in Philly are always just, oh my goodness, they're rowdy, they're like feisty. I mean, they'll back the hell out of the Eagles defense, but I mean, if it starts to become like the Eagles defense can't stop them, they might get boos from the crowd. I mean, it's really ride or die with this team, but with the Philly fans, but. Who knows? I mean, the other thing I think is funny is that we all know the Kirk Cousins thing with primetime games. He's 8-17 now or whatever, and so supposedly he's not good in primetime. So maybe that'll also help the Eagles. I don't know. I mean, that's just
Hey,
me adding
it's
some
another
little
thing to
thing.
kind of throw into the pot when you're looking into the game, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So really, yeah. On offense, at least those two players are the ones to look out for. And I guess more pressure on Kirk Cousins and really getting in his face. Really, there's just more pressure. I mean, better as a unit, more cohesive. I mean, tackles obviously can't whiff on those, especially on Justin Jefferson because he'll burn you for it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
they're
that's
also going to
that's
have to be better in that aspect. And I think that that's kind of something where it's like, how long is it going to take for us to see that true improvement? How long is it going to take us to see the form completely regained by some of these guys
yeah,
when it comes to tackling ability who obviously weren't playing in the preseason and weren't tackling to the ground. Um, and hopefully that you can see that as soon as now and don't have to wait around for week 3 to week 4 for it to really have the rust completely um, broken off. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about specifically with this game, but we also got to make reference to what happened yesterday with Dak Prescott.
oh yeah, no that. I mean, this is why I'm going to start off with this. This is why there's not been an NFC East repeat winner because something crazy like this, or just like someone gets injured, or like something like that, something that just like totally out of left field happens, and then the Cowboys might not even be in the running for the NFC East now, especially if Dak Prescott's out 6 to 8 weeks. So, I mean, this if anything should boost and motivate the Eagles overall. Like this is their division now. Like you got to win all the games you can now. And he might even miss the game against the Eagles in Philly, week 6. So
Yeah, I was
that's
going to say
another thing.
week 6 I'd imagine he'd still be out. I mean, that would be the
Yeah,
early early if he's back for week 6, that means he's back in, 4 weeks, the minimum amount of the timeline that he needed to get back. So,
yeah,
um I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm with you, man. After this injury, the Cowboys already looked very shaky yesterday with Dak
yeah,
Prescott there, and now they're rolling with Cooper Rush for an extended period of games. Look, I know the Giants won yesterday. I know the Commanders won yesterday. Those are both teams that at their ceiling are maybe competing for a wild card spot. This is without a doubt the Eagles' division to win at this point. I don't think there
yeah,
can be any question about that. So yeah, I think they got to go out and take it these next couple weeks. If Dallas is going to struggle for these next 5-6 weeks while Dak Prescott is out, the Eagles got to go out there. You got to beat teams like Washington, like Jacksonville, like Dallas without Dak Prescott, even Arizona and Minnesota, which may be tougher games. Go out and
yeah.
take care of business and really get a stranglehold on this division over the next couple weeks while Dallas is down their star quarterback.
Yeah, they have to. This just further adds like the no excuses thing. There's like they just have to go out and yeah, take it up to them. Take it to the NFC East really. But I guess the last thing I'll say about this game, the Eagles' offense against the Vikings defense. The Vikings had 4 sacks against Aaron Rodgers, and I mean only allowed 7 points, but that can sort of be attributed to Christian Watson, I believe, the rookie second rounder dropping a pass, a wide open 75-yard TD for the Packers. That would have been. And then the goal line stand the Vikings had. So I give credit to the Vikings that it's going to be a tougher test this time around than it was for the Lions against the Lions. So definitely got to be better, at least pass protection wise, and in I don't think they're gonna run for as many yards as they did yesterday against the Lions, but so they're gonna have to pass the ball a bit more, spread the ball out more, give Devontae Smith more targets, as well as Dallas Goedert. Just get your playmakers the ball. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I'm with you. This Vikings team is certainly a step up from the Lions. It's going to be much more of a test. Real quick, just a couple notes to break down the or preview, I guess, the Steelers Patriots matchup. It sounds like Mac Jones may not be able to go in this game.
Yeah.
It was reported today that it's back spasms that he's dealing with. There's
Hmm.
still some level of optimism to a certain extent that he could be able to play. But, I guess I'll look at it from two angles. If he's healthy, I think that this game is a little bit of a toss-up. As to who could win it, I think it'd be a pretty balanced effort. If Mac Jones isn't healthy, I don't really see any reason that the Steelers shouldn't be able to win this game. I think that they're a better team than the Patriots to begin
Yeah.
with, and then going up against Brian Hoyer versus Mac Jones, it's certainly a step down there. So, honestly, back spasms, I don't know how serious or to what extent he's dealing with, but if he can't play, I think that's certainly advantage Pittsburgh. And the way that the defense played this week, coupled with the Patriots' offensive struggles, and I don't really buy into what they're doing with their play calling right now. Not really having a true play caller.
Yeah.
Matt Patricia. I don't even know how excited you can get about that. I mean, you can't get excited about that.
No.
So, and it's the fact too that the Steelers, went out and did what they did. Forced turnovers when they also had to worry about guarding. Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins until he left the game with a concussion. Now you flip the script and you're going up against what? Jacoby Myers, Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar. I'm not trying to take anything away from those guys, but they're not on the same level as the Bengals wide receiving core. So that's where I think that the advantage kind of shifts to Pittsburgh, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're really going to limit this Patriots offense, especially if Mac Jones is in there. And, I want to see them kind of continue to, I want to see the run defense play kind of as well as they did in this last game. And I think that's kind of the key thing is, lean on your defense a bit. And let them kind of take charge and let them kind of be the driving force in this game and just hold this Patriots offense that I think is a step down from what you faced in the Bengals this week.
Yeah, I was gonna say if the front seven can hold the Patriots rushing game, which I assume is gonna be how they attack the Steelers this week.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna be they're gonna be one dimensional, and with Brian Hoyer possibly playing, I mean that's advantage Steelers defense right there. If you make them one dimensional.
And you know what? Here's kind of the other matchup too that I'm just thinking about this now. Left guard rookie Cole Strange is starting at left guard, similar to kind of what the Steelers had going this past week when it was Volson who Cam Hayward was lined up opposite.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. There's the mismatch that maybe you can take advantage of. And in week 1, it was only 78 rushing yards for the Patriots among their rushing attack. Can the Steelers replicate that if they can keep the Patriots, around 80 to 90 yards of rushing offense? And, obviously I think that they're going to hold their passing attack. I think that's certainly a path to victory. And then, you just got to kind of hope that Mitch Trubisky can manage the game again and they do enough on offense to get the victory.
Yeah, I mean, if the Steelers can do all that, I mean, and Hayward can take advantage of his matchup, I mean, the Steelers they should be getting the win.
They should be able to win this game. And like I said, this was a game that I saw as a toss-up at the start of the season. But if Mac Jones isn't playing, I really don't see any reason or any excuse why the Steelers shouldn't be able to win this game and start the season off 2-0.
Oh, nice. The phone calls are back.
Right.
Anyway, that's relevant.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I don't really have much more to add on the Steelers this game, and that's kind of what I'm keeping my eye on, and that Cam Hayward, Carson Strong match or Cole Strange matchup is what I have my eye on. So, yeah, like I said, I think that the Steelers should be able to come out of this 2-0, and it's definitely a game that's winnable if they can kind of follow those keys to the games that I just outlined.
Yeah, so you have the Steelers winning this game.
Yeah, I think the Steelers win this game. I mean, I'm not a big prediction guy as far as scores go.
Yeah,
it would be something that I'd hope that they could be in the range of, hey, can we make it a game that's like 20 to like 20 to 10, 20 to 13 would be the range I'd kind of be optimistic they could be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as for the Eagles, it's a toss-up for me. But
I think it's certainly more of a toss-up game for the Eagles. I think that the Vikings kind of came to the season as a little bit of an underrated team. I think they're built really well all across. Both their defense, their offensive line is strong. Obviously has a lot of talent at skill position. This is going to be a good test for both teams because I think these are both teams that maybe came into the season a little underrated. But in a weak NFC, you never know how deep these teams, could win a division and maybe make a run. And I think the Vikings proved a little something beating the Packers in week 1.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I think this is. I'm glad it's a primetime game that all the attention can kind of be on, and I'm looking forward to watching this Eagles game. Looking forward to hopefully the Steelers taking care of business against the Patriots.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be good. These next two. Next 2 games,
All right.
man.
All right, man. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up here?
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
That's all I'm
Go
saying.
Steelers. Sounds good. I don't think we need to say much more than that. So we will leave it as that. And that being said, I think that brings us to the end of another episode here. We thank you all for joining us whenever you do tune in and watch this episode. It's always been a blast. We'll be back next week breaking down these week 2 matchups and previewing week 3. And of course, going over and analyzing any other of the latest news surrounding both of these teams. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye now.